There's a certain quietness in people who have been through too much. It's not the quietness of peace or contentment. It's something else entirely, something heavier. It's the quietness of someone who has seen too much, endured too much, survived too much, and now exists in a state that most people can't quite understand. They're still here. They're still functioning. But something fundamental has shifted inside them, something that can't be put back the way it was. These aren't people who wear their trauma visibly. They're not falling apart in obvious ways. On the surface, they might seem perfectly fine, maybe even strong, resilient, admirable. They go to work. They fulfill obligations. They interact normally. But if you look closer, if you really pay attention, you'll notice something. A distance in their eyes, a heaviness in their presence, a guardedness that never quite disappears. They're here, but they're also somewhere else, somewhere you can't reach, somewhere they went when things got too hard and never fully came back from. So what happens to people psychologically when they've been through too much? What changes inside them? And why do they seem so fundamentally different from people who haven't walked through fire? Let's start with what this actually means. Psychologists call it cumulative trauma or complex trauma. It's not one big devastating event, though that might be part of it. It's the accumulation, layer upon layer of difficult experiences, losses, betrayals, disappointments, pain, each one manageable on its own perhaps, but together they create something that fundamentally alters how a person experiences reality. Think about what happens when you go through something difficult. Your nervous system activates, stress hormones flood your body, your brain shifts into survival mode, and then, ideally, when the threat passes, your system calms down. You recover, you process, you return to baseline. But what happens when the threats don't stop coming? When you barely recover from one thing before the next thing hits? When your nervous system never gets a chance to fully calm down because survival mode has become your default state? This is what happens to people who have been through too much. Their nervous system gets stuck. Hypervigilance becomes permanent. The part of their brain that's supposed to assess danger and then stand down when it's safe stops standing down, because for them, it's never really been safe. Not for long enough, not consistently enough. So they stay alert, stay guarded, stay ready for the next catastrophe, because experience has taught them it's always coming. People who have been through too much often describe life as feeling like waiting for the other shoe to drop. They can't fully relax into good moments because they've learned that good moments end. They've learned that safety is temporary. They've learned that trust gets betrayed, that love leaves, that stability crumbles. And once you've learned these lessons deeply enough, your entire operating system changes. Here's what research tells us. Prolonged exposure to trauma and stress actually changes brain structure. The amygdala, your brain's fear center, becomes overactive. The hippocampus, which processes memories and regulates stress, can actually shrink. The prefrontal cortex, which handles emotional regulation and rational thinking, becomes less effective. This isn't metaphorical. This is literal, measurable, physical change in how the brain functions. What does this look like in daily life? It looks like someone who can't accept comfort easily, someone who flinches when good things happen, someone who sabotages relationships not because they want to, but because closeness feels dangerous when you've been hurt too many times. Someone who feels exhausted by basic social interaction because reading people for threats, managing their reactions, protecting themselves takes constant energy. There's also something called emotional numbing. After too much pain, the psyche protects itself by turning down the volume on all emotions, not just the bad ones. People who have been through too much often describe feeling disconnected from joy, from excitement, from hope, not because they're choosing to be negative, but because their system has learned that feeling too much of anything is dangerous, that hoping leads to disappointment, that joy will be taken away, that letting yourself feel makes you vulnerable. so they exist in a muted middle space, neither truly happy nor completely devastated, just here, just surviving, just getting through. Let's talk about what causes someone to reach this point, because it's never just one thing. Often it's childhood, years of instability, neglect, abuse, inconsistency, growing up in an environment where you never knew what was coming next, where love was conditional or absent, where you had to be hyper-aware just to stay safe. That kind of developmental trauma sets a foundation where the world never feels safe, where people never feel trustworthy, where you learn early that you're on your own. Sometimes it's a series of losses, people you loved dying, relationships ending badly, opportunities falling through, health problems, financial disasters, just one thing after another until you've lost so much that you stop believing anything good can last. You stop investing fully in anything because withdrawal feels inevitable. Sometimes it's betrayal, being let down by people you trusted, being hurt by people who were supposed to protect you, having your faith in humanity chipped away piece by piece until you can't remember what it felt like to believe people are fundamentally good. You become cynical not by choice, but by experience, and sometimes it's systemic, being marginalized, discriminated against, oppressed, having to fight for basic dignity day after day, watching injustice unfold and being powerless to stop it, living in a world that tells you you don't matter while demanding you keep showing up. That kind of chronic stress, that constant battle, it wears people down to nothing. Here's what makes this particularly isolating. You can't really explain it to people who haven't been through it. When you say you've been through too much, people think you're being dramatic. They point to people who've had it worse. They tell you to be grateful, to focus on the positive, to move on. They don't understand that you're not choosing to feel this way, that your nervous system has been rewired, that your brain has adapted to threat, that this isn't about perspective or attitude. This is about fundamental changes in how you process reality. So people who have been through too much learn to hide it. They become experts at appearing fine. They smile at the right times. They give appropriate responses. They function well enough that no one suspects how much energy it takes just to exist in a normal conversation. But inside, they're constantly managing, constantly calculating, constantly braced for impact. Let's talk about the daily reality of this. Every interaction carries weight. People say harmless things that trigger old wounds. Someone cancels plans and it confirms that people always leave. Someone raises their voice slightly and you're back in a moment from years ago when raising voices meant danger. You're constantly translating present moments through the lens of past trauma, and that's exhausting. Trust feels impossible, not because you don't want to trust, but because you've learned too well what happens when you do. So you keep people at arm's length. You test them. You wait for them to prove they'll hurt you like everyone else did. And when they inevitably make a mistake, because humans do, it confirms everything you already knew. You were right not to trust. You were right to protect yourself. Sleep becomes difficult. Your brain won't let you fully rest because rest means vulnerability. Nightmares are common. So is insomnia. You lie awake running through scenarios, preparing for disasters, unable to turn off the threat detection system that's been running for so long, it doesn't know how to stop. Here's something important. This isn't weakness, this is adaptation. People who have been through too much have survived things that would have broken others. Their hypervigilance, their guardedness, their emotional numbing, these aren't character flaws. These are survival mechanisms that worked. They kept them alive. They got them through. The tragedy is that these mechanisms that saved them also isolate them, exhaust them, and make it nearly impossible to fully experience life even when the threats have passed. There's a concept in psychology called learned helplessness, where repeated exposure to uncontrollable negative events makes you stop believing you can change anything. People who have been through too much often live with learned helplessness about life itself. They've tried, they've hoped, they've worked to make things better, and maybe things improved briefly, but then they got hard again and again, until trying feels pointless, until the lesson they've learned is that no matter what they do, bad things will happen anyway. Let's talk about what helps, Because if you're someone who has been through too much, or you know someone who has, understanding that this is real is the first step. This isn't about being negative or dramatic. This is legitimate psychological injury that deserves compassion, not judgment. Professional help matters. Trauma-informed therapy, specifically approaches like EMDR or somatic experiencing, can help rewire the nervous system. These therapies work with the body's stress response, helping it learn that it's safe to stand down now. Medication can help regulate the brain chemistry that's been disrupted by chronic stress. But beyond that, what people who have been through too much need most is patience. They need people who won't take their guardedness personally, who won't try to force closeness or trust before they're ready, who can be consistently present without demanding emotional reciprocity, who understand that healing from this kind of damage doesn't happen on a timeline. They need small moments of safety, not promises that everything will be fine forever, because they don't believe that anyway, but small, consistent demonstrations that right now, in this moment, they're okay. A calm presence, a lack of judgment, someone who can sit with their heaviness without trying to fix it or minimize it. They need permission to be where they are, permission to not be healed yet, permission to still be affected by things that happened years ago, permission to protect themselves in ways that might seem extreme to others, because those protections kept them alive, and abandoning them feels terrifying. Here's what I want you to understand. If you've been through too much, your wariness isn't paranoia. Your guardedness isn't dysfunction. Your difficulty trusting isn't a character flaw. You're a person whose system adapted to survive impossible circumstances. And yes, those adaptations might make life harder now, but they also prove how strong you are, how resilient, how capable of surviving what should have destroyed you. And to everyone else, the quiet person who seems distant, the friend who keeps everyone at arm's length, the coworker who flinches at loud noises, they might be carrying more than you can imagine. They're not cold or unfriendly. They're protecting themselves in the only way they know how. So be patient, be consistent, don't demand more than they can give, and understand that trust, for someone who's been through too much, isn't given easily. It's earned slowly through repeated proof that you're safe, that you'll stay, that you won't add to the pile of pain they're already carrying. Because sometimes the most helpful thing you can offer someone who's been through too much isn't advice or solutions. It's simply being present, being steady, being safe, not trying to fix them or rush their healing, but just being someone who stays, someone who proves, through action, that not everyone leaves, that not everything ends badly, that safety, while maybe not permanent, can at least be real for right now. And maybe with enough time, enough safety, enough consistent proof that the worst is over, the nervous system begins to relax. The guardedness softens slightly. The heaviness lifts just a bit, not all at once, not completely, but enough. Enough to take a full breath, enough to cautiously hope, enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, having been through too much doesn't have to define the rest of your life.